Hello, I'm Frankie, and I'm honoured to be welcoming you today to AIPH's Green City Briefing series. We have a wonderful webinar ahead of us. But first, can I thank our sponsors, Expo 2023 Doha, Qatar, and the Worshipful Company of Gardeners for their continued support with this series. Now it is my privilege to introduce the MC for today. Tim Badman is head of the Heritage, Culture and Youth team at IUCN, which hosts IUCN's Urban Initiative. Amongst many great projects, Tim has been the director of IUCN's Nature Culture Initiative 2019 to 2020. He is the chair of the IUCN World Heritage Panel, so we are in very capable hands today. Tim, please may I hand over to you.
Well, Frankie, thanks very much for the invitation. Good morning, good afternoon or good evening to everybody that's joining us. And if you celebrate it, a happy Valentine's Day as well. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for the invitation. And also on behalf of IUCN, let me express our support to the Green City Briefings as a follow-up to our collaboration with AIPH, where we hosted the World Green City Awards in just last year in Korea. If you don't know IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, we're the world's oldest and largest conservation network. We're actually as old as AIPH. We were set up in 1948, and we bring together 1,400 members who are governments, government agencies, NGO members, but also members that are Indigenous peoples organizations. And since 2021, a new category of subnational governments, including cities, in our membership, as well as a global network of 15,000 experts worldwide. And our role really is to bring the conservation movement together across public, private, and non-governmental organizations. And we focus on providing solutions, the knowledge, the tools, and the projects that will enable us all to thrive together with nature, whether that's about data, whether that's about assessments, whether that's about establishing trusted standards, whether it's about convening the discussions that are needed to tackle difficult issues, or whether it's building capacity and providing training. And so you'll find us working on the Sustainable Development Goals. You'll find us supporting the new Global Biodiversity Framework just negotiated in the home city of Joan, who we'll hear from later in Montreal, negotiated last year, as well as our roles that have been mentioned with conventions such as the World Heritage Convention. And with our urban work, we're really scaling this work up. So we have the IUCN Urban Alliance. We try to mobilize our global standard for nature-based solutions in cities. We're just finalizing the latest edition of the IUCN Urban Nature Index, and we also manage the Panorama Cities portal, which we put together with the World Bank. So please do go and find our cities work. And thanks again for the opportunity to join and support our efforts together today. But let me turn to the webinar that we're going to host today, and this is about living green for water. I'm delighted to say that we'll be profiling one of the award winners of Montreal in the second presentation today. And what we'll be looking at is the way that water is key in cities, both as a risk, for instance, the issues that cities are facing with adapting to flooding, but also it's crucial for how cities live, drinking water or the multifunctional and beautiful green spaces that cities rely on. So we're going to be showcasing great examples of solutions in this event. We'll hear from Montreal a little bit later, but let me introduce our first speaker, the first of our two speakers, who is Gary Grant. So welcome, Gary, to the webinar today. Gary is the technical director at the Green Infrastructure Consultancy, is a distinguished lecturer with roles in many universities, also a distinguished author with a number of book titles under his belt, including The Water Sensitive City, published in 2016. And he's worked in projects across many cities and in several different countries, involved in the planning, design, installation, and maintenance of hundreds of urban greening projects, including work on green roofs, green walls, rain gardens, and other interventions. Gary's going to make a presentation here which will focus on a new a new framework that's looking at blue nature-based solutions created by Natural England, and he'll be talking to the principles of the Green Infrastructure Framework that's only just been launched at the end of last month. So Gary, as the lead author of that document, please let me invite you to take the floor. You have 15 minutes. I'll give you a couple of minutes warning if we're approaching the time. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. First of all, I'd like to apologise to the organisers and sponsors, because the virtual background is struggling to be uploaded. But of course, imagine you're seeing the logos of the AIPH Green City Briefings and the Worshipful Company of Gardeners, and of course, not forgetting Expo 2023 Doha, Qatar. So forgive me for that. So what I've decided to do is use the 15 principles as a hook, if you like. I mustn't forget that we're thinking about water. It seems strange that people would even forget about that, but let's have a look at the slides. Hopefully you can see the slides now. So as you've heard, I am working in green structure strategy planning, some detailed design and projects. So this picture here is a retrofit green wall in Victoria, London, which has 10,000 plants in it. And what was special about that was we collected rainwater from the roof and used that to irrigate the wall, because at the time in 2012 there'd been a lot of criticism of, or the suggestion was made that we were wasting potable water. So this one is irrigated with rainwater. So ornamental features or features that provide biodiversity can also be features that save water, and of course you're getting the evaporative cooling in summer as well. So the principles that have just been launched a couple of weeks ago, and there's a link there for people who want to know more, are the how, what and why. And of course sometimes there's a debate about what you start with, the what or the why, or perhaps you don't start with the how. But anyway, I'm going to just use these. So why do we want green infrastructure? We want all of these benefits. We want thriving, prosperous places and active and healthy places, nature-rich places, and so on. So these are the why principles. They're benefit principles, if you like. So first of all, we want nature-rich places, we want habitats, and we can have them in unexpected places. So this is the David Attenborough building, which houses the Cambridge Conservation Initiative in Cambridge. Lots of conservation bodies are in there together, hopefully collaborating more than they did. We had the pleasure of retrofitting a biodiverse green roof on there. That's about insects for pollinators and so on, low maintenance, low weight. Of course, it does soak up some of the rain that lands on there and helps keep rain off of the streets and from the drains. So there's sustainable drainage element to that. Active and healthy places. So increasingly, especially with lockdown, people are thinking about getting more people out and about, enjoying parks, seeing vegetation, getting their feet wet. This is a play feature that in Elephant Park, South London, in the heat waves that we're getting, I think we're going to see more and more of that. So this is about helping people to live healthier lives by getting them out and about in green infrastructure and green space. Now, this is a green wall that went in at the height of the financial crisis in 2009. And is a brand new shopping centre, and there was a fear that they would not let those units. And they were all let, to the surprise of the owners, and the reason was that there was this giant green wall nearby. So this meant that a restaurant chain were more likely to move in. So there you are. The wall paid for itself, because without that, there would have been just some buildings to look at, perhaps not quite so attractive. So that paid for itself. Back to rainwater management. So one of the criticisms of the green walls that we worked on, as I say, was that we were wasting potable water. Then there was the criticism, well, it's too complicated. You have all these pumps and irrigation and sensors and so on. So this is in effect, a passive green wall. So water from downpipes, instead of going into the drains, goes into tanks behind the wall, and then the water is then wicked into the planters. And it worked, although it was an experiment, it's worked incredibly well, and it's been tripled in size. It's very low maintenance, no plumbing. For those of you that are technical, you can see there's a section there on the left, and the idea is you have these tanks which sequentially fill up from the downpipes, and then they actually, as I say, wick through into the planters. So I'm surprised that there isn't more of this, but our colleagues in the Netherlands are using quite a lot of wicking technology now in green walls. So still slow on adoption, but it is getting there. So it can be very effective at reducing the amount of water that ends up in the drains and reducing use of water for irrigation. So we're all concerned about climate change, heat waves and downpours. We've talked a bit about drainage, but of course, evaporative cooling is really important. So here is a green wall in Southampton Row in London, and you can see a thermal image, very hot day. The conventional walls are up to in the 40s centigrade. I've measured facades that are in the 50s centigrade, and roofs that are in the 60s centigrade, but the green wall is at an ambient temperature because of the evaporative cooling. So even when you do irrigate, it's not wasted, it's cooling the building, which is reducing the energy demand for air conditioning. So what do we want? We want things to be multifunctional, we want variety, connectivity, and so on. So let's have a quick look at what green infrastructure might be. So it is about multifunctionality. So on the left there, you can see a rain garden, which is about reducing surface water flooding, but it's near a school, and Bob Bray Associates, the landscape architects, were thinking multifunctionality. We can make a fun feature here for children scooting to school. They can go on that little miniature boardwalk. Some people were concerned, what happens if a child falls off and so on, but actually they're pretty good at this. And I'd rather they were there than in the street itself. So multifunctional, thinking about multifunctionality leads to some really nice combinations. We don't have to have one feature, one function. We can encourage people to think about all of these things. Materials, biodiversity, water treatment, flood. As SUDS is about improving water quality. It's about reducing the volume of water, but yeah, play areas, all sorts of features. And variety is important. The right plant, the right place, the right feature, the right place aspect. And so it's really important that we don't become addicted to a catalogue way of thinking, where there's a catalogue of things and then we just build the city like a giant Lego set. We really need variety there, and also things that are locally appropriate. Connectivity is a big deal, both for people and wildlife. So you've got a wildlife bridge in the Netherlands, top right there. But of course, bridges can be for people as well. So that multifunctionality comes into it. And traffic-free travel now is a big deal, and we need to learn from our colleagues in the Netherlands and elsewhere who are already years ahead to make sure that we've got those traffic-free routes for cycling, walking, and so on, but also that they become green corridors, both for wildlife and people, and link together the core areas, the nature reserves and the parks with corridors, or if we can't make corridors, stepping stones, which might be things like green roofs where, for instance, butterflies might move from one roof to another, or birds. So it's not always about corridors at ground level. Cities are three-dimensional. And of course, accessibility is a big deal. Natural England are promoting this idea of accessible green space, and there are standards there for that. So it's important that you get to somewhere which is natural, within walking distance, ideally, that you don't have to get in a car or jump in a train to enjoy nature. So there's a lot of thinking in local authorities about how we can open up features like towpaths. I think this might be a canal towpath. Now, in the discussions of the Green Infrastructure Guidance document, which I was lead author of for Natural England, there was a lot of input from geologists, ecologists, archaeologists, and historic environment experts, emphasizing how we need to really understand a place and respond to its character. And this is a project which is in the case studies, which you can have a look at, and that will grow and grow. Natural England will put a lot of case studies in there. And this case study is about the restoration of a historic area which was run down, and putting green infrastructure in there and making sure that it complemented the historic features and worked well with it. So some interesting thoughts there for those of you that perhaps haven't thought enough about heritage, geology, archaeology, and so on. How do we do this? It's a process. Probably we do need to know why we're doing it first, but anyway, how do we do it? There's great emphasis nowadays on stakeholder engagement, partnerships, and so on. So we wrote the green infrastructure strategy for Swansea City in Wales, and we spent a lot of time talking to people in the high street, set up a store. We had lots and lots of meetings with experts, but also business people, with residents. And we went around the schools and asked them to chalk up what they'd like to see. And I think this was a useful exercise because, the hive mind, if you like, but also it really helps to engage people. And so instead of having a document that's produced, just put on the shelf or put on the hard drive and forgotten, you've got a living document which has actually changed the culture of the town. And we've got a lot of really interesting projects at all scales that are coming through there. So we need evidence. We need to use the science. So I'm a great fan of course, mapping and describing what we already have, but also using computer modeling to see the effect of green infrastructure on plans. And the EnviMet software, which is used as the engine for the Green Pass method, is a really great way for architects and planners to test options and to see where there could be problems with wind tunnels, with overheating in summer, with flood, and then testing virtually green infrastructure interventions to see what is most effective and what works where. So I really encourage you to have a look at Green Pass and have a look at EnviMet and see what they can do. So of course we've got to be strategic. Planners have been doing this for a long time, making maps of where things will go in the future. Sometimes that gets forgotten, but this was a nice outcome in Swansea where this green artery was proposed, where there's ways of joining together existing green space. But then it pointed out that there was this forlorn 1970s hotel which could do with sprucing up, and rather than demolishing it, one option is to green it with a green wall, and that is something which is now in process. So we expect to see something installed this year. So it's a great way of refurbishing older property as well, using soil, vegetation, and water. And then we want to create places perhaps where there weren't any. So I was fortunate enough to be in the winning team for this scheme in Singapore to turn a disused railway line into a cycle lane. That was the brief, but we wanted to do more than that. We wanted to make interesting places, turn old stations into destinations, to even where we've got modern infrastructure, we're thinking, well, we could put planting under that and turn this into a catalyst for lots and lots of projects along the whole 25-kilometre route. So it's still something that's in the planning, but a good example of how you can use soil and vegetation to really do a lot more with what would otherwise just be simply a cycle path. And then finally, we need to really nurture our green infrastructure. We need to monitor our green infrastructure, and frankly, we've been rather poor at that at times. We spend money on capital projects, we build things and then neglect them because the money isn't there. So the argument goes, but of course it's money well invested, it creates jobs, it ensures that all those benefits continue. And one of the positive things about green walls, for instance, is that you can see them. So if you neglect them, someone will notice. Perhaps with some other things, you can get away with a bit more. But yes, don't forget long-term nurture of these features. So I'm going to hand back now, and hopefully I haven't run over too much, Tim.
Thanks, thanks, Gary. No, perfect timing. So a wonderful presentation. I think very kind of comprehensive expose of all the things that we need to be thinking about, but also perfectly to time. So thank you for that. And with that, let me turn without any delay to our second speaker, and let me welcome Joan Laur from the who is the research and who works in the research and development division of the Montreal Botanical Garden. So a warm welcome, Joan. Thanks also for getting up early. It's breakfast time, I think, still in Montreal. So Joan is working as a scientific director on the Pathway to Phytotechnology major initiative. She's also an assistant professor at the University of Montreal, and she leads a research group of graduate students and postdoctorate fellows. And her work has been recognized with a series of awards for her collaborative, innovative, and original approaches to research. And Joan is going to speak to the award-winning project of the Botanical Garden. So Joan, without any further delay, I won't say anything about the project because it'll spoil the surprise for anybody that's not read about it. And the floor is yours. Bienvenue.
So, well, thank you for this nice introduction. First of all, I will take a few seconds of my time to tell you how proud we are to receive this prize at the City of Montreal and at the Space for Life complex of museum, which Montreal Botanical Garden is a part of. An important part of what I will show you was delivered and shared to the public during the last 3 years, so during pandemic time. So you can easily imagine how nice, how timely it was for all of us to see our effort recognized by the AIPH last summer. So in the name of all Montreal employees that were involved in the deployment of this major initiative at the Montreal Botanical Garden, which is Pathway to Phytotechnology, I would like to thank you a lot. So I think I can now start my own presentation, and I won't talk about science. I will only talk about Pathway to Phytotechnology and about our work at the Botanical Garden. So Pathway to Phytotechnology is a series of stations of space that we put in place within the Montreal Botanical Garden, with the idea to have the whole Botanical Garden being a phytotechnology station. So we can showcase how the plants can be used to solve any environmental problem. So what you can, well, the first time I was in the Montreal Botanical Garden, I was a young French girl coming in Canada and was starting my PhD in Alberta, back further west. And well, I was absolutely amazed by this space, by the people that I met there. That was kind of my dream job. So I got my dream job. And I hope that you will feel the exceptional character of the museum during my presentation, and I hope that you will come to Montreal and visit us. So what you can see here is a nice image that I like to show to my students. It's actually what was our arboretum almost a century ago. Like many other parks in Montreal, it was, if I'm polite, I will say a stone pit. It was a garbage dump also. And well, it is actually one of the most beautiful arboretums you can imagine. It's 6,000 specimens of trees and shrubs. They grew perfectly well in less than 100 years. And this is also one of the largest islands of freshness that we got in the city. in my perspective, it's the first phytotechnology station that we do have in the garden, and it has actually really used by Montrealers, by schools, by summer camp, and we can actually there show what services green infrastructure can provide. So I won't show you any images of the Arboretum. I hope you will come and see them. So today, we believe that a whole botanical garden can be even more important in the city in our way to transition to the next climate that we will have to face. Montreal is actually a very big city, a very growing city. And like many others, we have to face global warming and climate change, and we do feel it's already a lot. A challenge that we have is that's the number that you can see, and they are quite evident already. A challenge that we have to fight is that the perception of the population is maybe different in Canada. We have more warmer, more temperature now. It's more clement. We have a wider growing season, and well, we will still have sufficient precipitation. So not really a big deal. Remember that taxpayers do only pay tax for water. We do not have any bill at the end of the month as a Canadian citizen, so for water. So it's kind of difficult to make people understand how important it is to save our water, or how drastic will be the climate change. Of course it is. Of course we have very hot summer, drastic heat wave, and we have stormy rain, stormy snows that are already coming. But it is a challenge to make people understand what is actually happening. And Canadians are actually wasting a lot of water. So, well, that's it. And we at Montreal and we at the Botanical Garden believe that we have to adapt. Evidently, we do see changes, we do see consequences on the vegetation, on the botanical garden already, and we have to make our garden and make the city resilient. And we believe that we can be a key player in engagement, in education, and in training at the botanical garden. This is one of my students working with a young kid in summer camp in the garden in one of our experimental plots. And I do believe that we have everything in place, because our garden is the host of several events. We have artists in residence. We also have, well, a fantastic education and museology division at the Botanical Garden, and in all other museums at Space for Life. Our education and museology division, I believe, is one of the most successful in the province. So we can be proud of what we are. And we are also a botanical garden that was designed, envisioned by a professor at the University of Alberta, of Montreal, the brother Marie Victorin, who decided at the early beginning to put in place within the wall of the Botanical Garden Research Institute. We are more than 20 researchers in place within the Montreal Botanical Garden, with more than 200 grad students, postdoc, undergrad, who have to interact every day with staff from the Botanical Garden and the general public. I think this is quite key in what we can do and what we will do, and the vision that everyone that is working at the Botanical Garden wants to do. So this is actually a part of our research institute within the Botanical Garden. And this is one experiment that our students, this is Henri Béral, which is a soon-to-be PhD, he's from Jacques Brisson lab, was doing, and he was able to do this crazy experiment during 3 years. Actually, it was running, because the staff from the Botanical Garden was involved in his wall setup. So that's the kind of things that we can do. This is an experiment of one of my master students. This was designed by his master student and by people at the Botanical Garden as a constructed wetland close. And we are using it to treat or contaminated water, both from the research institute, so you can imagine what is going in that thing, and from the horticulture department of the Botanical Garden. So this kind of experiment can be done because we are in close collaboration between the whole divisions that are in place at the Botanical Garden. This is also another example of collaboration. We benefit from a wall system. Here you can see an artist, Alexander Burton, working with someone from the National Film Board Institute. I'm not sure about the translation. So we are working with people from very different perspectives, and that's what makes us able to envision the next Botanical Garden, keeping in mind what it was and keeping in mind what it will be. So this is one of the large initiatives that I will talk later on. This is one of the pathway to phytotechnology stations that is put in place during pandemic. So people were coming, working late, kind of alone in the garden, and things were well built. So yeah, we'll show you a few images of what is pathway to phytotechnology. So as I said, we want to keep in mind what was the historical Botanical Garden. It will still be the historical Botanical Garden, but we are slowly moving to something way more resilient. So this is the first station of pathway to phytotechnology. This was built a total rebuild of the aquatic garden back in 2019. We rebuilt this historic garden, which was one that was consuming a crazy amount of water, of tap water. We just opened the tap, and that was the way we filled the aquatic garden. That was a total nonsense, ecologically speaking, nowadays. So what we did is that we implement two filtering marches on the edge of this very beautiful aquatic garden, and those were sufficient to put the whole water circuit in closed loop, so we are not wasting any more water, less than 5%. That's the amount that we were using before that. It has also other benefits. It is also a nice buffer for the stormwater that was within this aquatic garden. So that was the first pathway to phytotechnology station that we put in place. It is a huge success. It showcases how nice, how beautiful green infrastructure can be. And well, this one was open to the public just a few weeks after I got my current position. Before that, I was postdoc at the Botanical Garden. So it was a nice start of my job. This second one was open. That's the one that you were seeing building a few slides ago. This is another historic garden that we had. That was a small lake, totally invaded by invasive species. It was, well, no clear water at all. So this one, we decided to rebuild it entirely using only indigenous species and nice phytotechnology setup to showcase how easy to maintain it can be to have this kind of setup in a garden or even in a more natural area. So that's it. The next one is the last pathway to phytotechnology station that was opened a few months ago. This is not related to water, but in a way, yes. This is the only the only garden that we have that is not irrigated at all. This was a build seed on a wasteland that we were using to put or dig in the soil from excavation in the garden when we put a new building in place and everything. So that was totally infantile, no plant at all, only 2 years ago. And this is an art and science project that will go for the next 10 years, where both Alexandre Burton, an artist, Mélanie Crépin, another one, will monitor things for the next 7 years and the next 10 years, and my team of grad students will follow it on the other way, and scientific way. So this is a nice setup that we have both outside and inside, which is quite important in Canada because of winter. Showcase what is phytotechnology in the middle of the winter is kind of nice. So yeah, I believe this is it. As I said, Botanical Garden is part of a complex of museums that are all around the city, and that all, of course, showcase phytotechnology. So yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Joan. And again, thanks also for brilliant timekeeping. And so we're completely on time for our webinar, and we can now turn to questions and comments from the audience. So please don't hesitate to add any questions in the Q&A. And let me get started. I have a first question for Gary, actually. So Gary, the green infrastructure framework. So yeah, let's all get on camera. The green infrastructure framework is aligned with UK planning and policies. Could you just say a word about how transferable you think the framework is to other regions and other countries, please?
Yep, very, very interesting question, very good question. I would say that there are many ideas that are coming into the UK that have come from Germany in particular. So the urban greening factor, which is being promoted by Natural England now, as part of this framework, it's not a requirement, but it's being promoted. It's already been adopted in London and Southampton and Swansea in Wales, and that is based on the Berlin biotope area factor, which is about 30 years old. So I would say absolutely, it may well be that there are ideas that come out of what Natural England are doing, but most of them are not new. It's about codifying them, about building the evidence base, which now is huge. So yeah, I would say, in short, definitely, of course, we have to respect other people's systems, their politics, their planning systems and so on. But I think the essence of getting more soil and vegetation and water into cities is there. And then it's about how do you transpose that into policy? And you know, that's a conversation which might take a while. But yeah, yes, in short, yes, you can definitely learn. We can all learn from each other with this. So don't be baffled by terms you're not familiar with. Get underneath it, find out what it's actually about, and then translate it into your own culture, your own language, your own, you know, whatever you need to do in your own country, your own city. Okay, thanks, Gary. Joan, what were you thinking as you were listening to Gary's presentation about transferability to Montréal?
Indeed, it is a question that we have frequently because we are part of the city and both researchers people. So yeah, that's kind of key for us to show transferability and the easiness to implement things. What is funny is that the first stations that we had in place, those filtering marches, are giving ideas to people that are not living in the city and are not connected to wastewater systems. So that's kind of really interesting to see how people can both stakeholders, so small cities, and people like population can just take our idea and use them by themselves, even if it's not really allowed.
Okay, look, thank you. Let me turn to another question. This has been addressed to both speakers. So plant choice is critical for successful blue-green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in cities. And the question is, what's your experience of native plants being used in blue-green infrastructure? Are these being commercially produced? Are they available, and are they effective? I'll ask Joan maybe to take that question first.
That's actually a part of my my research proposal in general, to see how native species can be used in green infrastructure. It is quite surprising that the major challenge that we have is they are difficult to find commercially speaking. Their effectiveness is evident. They are resilient, they are adapted. They might not be that productive, but we are not working in a productive way. We don't need many biomass, too much biomass. We just need plants that are easy to manage and to maintain. So, yeah.
Gary, you want to add?
I think Joan's right. There are problems because the traditional horticultural business has concentrated on ornamental plants, which are often non-native. And so there are difficulties in some places getting hold of native plants in the numbers that we would require. And that is a challenge all over the world. There's no doubt about that. And we do need to gear up. When I'm advising on projects, I tend to say that people should look at native planting because of the biodiversity benefits. And if for whatever reason they're deviating from that, then they need to justify why they're using plants. So we're quite relaxed. We tend to be more relaxed about this, perhaps in England than in some countries. But we tend to say, well, if you are using ornamental planting, can you choose species, for instance, that have a documented value for wildlife? So, for instance, the RHS has a list of plants for pollinators. There's a huge list there. So when people say, well, I can't really accept your advice because I need the creative freedom to choose attractive plants, that's probably not the case, because the RHS gives solid advice on that. So, we've got a global biodiversity crisis, so we do need to restore habitat wherever we can. And it's not just pollinators, it's larval food plants as well. And this is where native plants come in. So a butterfly that can feed from an exotic flower is that's one thing, but that butterfly also needs to lay its eggs, and its caterpillars need to grow up on a native plant. So we do need to think of habitat, ecosystems, restoring biodiversity. So that needs to be part of our consideration, as well as how attractive planting is, how easy it is to maintain, aspects. Is it shady and not? All those things that gardeners know about. We now also need to look at the restoration of biodiversity.
Okay, look, great, thank you. I'll take another question, which is also, I guess, sort of looking at sort of trends and issues in implementation for both of the speakers. And this is noting that blue-green infrastructure is about a combination of plants and often engineering. And the question is really what's happening with technology that's enabling new approaches or better approaches? Is there anything, I think, Gary, you mentioned wicking technology, for instance, but what would be your sense of technology trends that are influencing the sorts of plants that are being successfully used for water management in cities? I'll go to Gary first this time, and then to Joan. Gary.
Well, as I mentioned, I think artificial intelligence, remote sensing will have a huge role in the future, because we'll be able to monitor the impact of our soil and vegetation in terms of microclimates, but also we'll be able to model what we're doing. So I think that side of technology has great promise. I'm also very interested in monitoring things like bats, which you can listen to automatically and record and put on a website, or insect calls, or birds. So I think we can find out more about what we're sharing our cities with technology. I'm a bit skeptical about high tech with horticulture for the sake of it. So I like to try and simplify things. When you get these overcomplicated irrigation schemes, that's just something waiting to break. Where technology might come in is making sure that maintenance people can see when a fault occurs, and that's very helpful as well. So, okay, sometimes we need to irrigate, sometimes we need to do something. That's when I want an app on my phone which will give me a warning when, for instance, the water supply is interrupted or when there's a problem. So, yes, definitely a role for technology, but I would just say don't get too carried away. You know, sometimes we're driven by the technologists who are trying to sell us perhaps techniques and equipment that we possibly don't need, and we all love a gadget, don't we? So I would just say, yes, I'm for it, but we need to be sure that we're going back to the principles and we're doing things for the right reasons. Okay,
Joan, technology, what's your
I
thought?
totally agree with Gary. Actually, I believe that technology is quite interesting, quite necessary for monitoring, in a monitoring perspective. But please use low tech for the general management of any green blue infrastructure. A technology that Gary didn't mention is DNA monitoring, environmental monitoring, which is quite easy and quite cheap today, just to monitor the biodiversity that is present and any remnants of pathogen, for example. But that's about it. I'm not biotech people.
Thank you. We have a very specific question for Gary about the value. What's your view of the value and benefits of rainwater planters as a measure in sustainable urban drainage systems? Let me try on that specific question.
So I think the question refers to these planters, where you intercept a downpipe and then it goes into a box which is below a planter, so it just intercepts a little bit of water and perhaps irrigates the planter, that kind of thing. They call them suds planters sometimes, or downpipe planters. And of course, they're not necessarily on their own going to solve urban flooding, but I see them as entry level, if you like, and often it's a great way to engage with people. We often have projects where we have grand plans for huge drainage areas or areas of habitat to absorb and clean water runoff. And of course, often there's no money, there's no maintenance. So this is sometimes a way of getting people to do something affordable, which often volunteers can look after. And that's a positive thing in itself. And of course, it's educational, and it will often then lead in a year or two to a discussion where people realize that sustainable drainage, as we call it, is a thing. And then it means it's easier the next time around to do what you actually wanted to do in the first place. So I see it as part of a process, but on its own, it probably isn't enough. So I hope that I've not been too negative about it. I'm trying to be positive, but it's not necessarily always enough.
Joan, you're smiling. I don't know if you want to add.
No, it's definitely a tool that we are using with summer camp a lot just to educate kids with it. Yeah. And well, rainwater planter can be way bigger in the middle of a city. That's it.
Okay, great. Look, let me turn to a last question. So, I mean, I could frame this in various different ways, but Gary, you've talked about the evidence base that there is for things that are working, and here we're talking about really the transition to practice and the transition to big scale practice. So this isn't the sort of the exceptional thing that's happening in a few kind of boutique projects, but becomes really the way that we sort of live with and plan our cities. So what if you could wish for one thing, or maybe you can have two things because we've got the time, that would really kind of help the transformation to happen, would sort of turn what we're talking about here, greening cities, sustainable management of water into the norm, what would you wish for? And I'm gonna start with Joan this time, and Gary will give you the last word. Joan, you have two wishes to change things for the better. What would you like?
The thing is, we have those summer camp in the Botanical Garden for years. And what is just fantastic is see those young kids that were at the Botanical Garden 20 years ago are now part of our citizens that are active. I believe that's the key. Education is definitely the key, just to pass through, and whatever the norm will be, people will do. Really, that's it.
Okay, Gary.
Well, that's a difficult question. Well, before I answer the question, I just want to mention the Green Infrastructure Resource Library, GIRL, which is curated by Ingo Schuder, and it's a massive searchable database of evidence for green infrastructure, which is updated daily. And so we're past the stage where people can say there's no evidence or there's insufficient evidence. I used to get that back in the day when perhaps it was patchy, but we're past that now. We know that this is the right thing to do. But in terms of the two things, so I think we're making really, really good progress, but I would like to see engineers and some other built environment professionals really start to embrace this stuff and not see it as an add-on that goes in parallel to grey and conventional infrastructure. In many cases, green infrastructure can replace grey infrastructure much more than people realize. So that's where we are moving there, but because a lot of the engineers and practitioners were educated years ago, they're a little bit out of date. But the youngsters are coming and they've got all this in their education. And then the final point, or the second idea, is about the nurture and the maintenance. We have a real problem with out-of-date attitudes to the maintenance of green infrastructure. People are only concerned with keeping it tidy, collecting leaves and dumping them somewhere. And so we need a huge effort to make those jobs more interesting, train people, promote the management of green infrastructure as a profession much more than we have, pay people a bit more, train them more. And I'm very positive about that as well, because I think it is a great career. You know, once you've got the status that you deserve, you're outdoors, you're enjoying yourself, aren't you? And there's a lot to be said for it. Perhaps the pay, as I say, the pay needs to be boosted a little bit, but that goes for a lot of people. But yeah, let's turn the maintenance of green infrastructure into something that's very positive, that a lot of people want to get involved in, and a lot more people know more about.
Okay. Look, thanks very much. I'm afraid at this moment we have to bring the discussion to a close. I know we didn't get to all of the questions, and Frankie, you'll probably say how people can continue the conversation going forward. But let me just close by thanking our two brilliant and inspiring speakers, Gary and Joan, for their wonderful presentations. Joan, thanks again, and congratulations again for the award, and to all of your collaborators in Montreal. And from me, thanks for this opportunity to join you today. And Frankie, I think with that, we're on time, and let me hand it back to you to bring us to a conclusion. Thanks to everybody, and you can hear the applause from 45 countries, Gary and Joan, for your brilliant work. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. That was a really interesting webinar and a brilliant final question. A delight to hear those inspiring thoughts. Thank you to our speakers and Tim for the emceeing. You were all immaculately to time and really interesting. Thank you. And as it happens, it ties really nicely into our next briefing on the ideas of how we inspire and engage with young people. On the 21st of March, we are showcasing the role of schoolyards in becoming transformative spaces for climate-ready cities with cohesive communities. So do join us next month for that. The results of our poll, you'll be interested to hear that when we arrived at this webinar, 42% of us had, yes, direct experience of the power of plants in managing water resources in urban environments, 27% knew of good examples, and 30% had this as the first time they'd heard of it. So now I'm sure you're feeling really inspired and actually quite knowledgeable on the topic. I would like to once again thank our sponsors, the Worshipful Company of Gardeners and Expo 2023, Doha, Qatar. Until next time, you can join us in discussion with the AIPH Green City Forum. Follow us on Twitter and sign up to the Global City Update. Join AIPH in showcasing the power of plants in creating resilient green cities. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world. I hope you have a brilliant day, and we'll see you next time.
You are a seed, the beginning of a new awareness, a new global movement. You have life in you. Share it, spread it, bring your thoughts and skills. Make it all fruitful. Tomorrow brings challenges and opportunities. Grow. Grow the resources to embrace science and experience for global sustainability. Grow the tools and use technology to cultivate a new and better future together. Grow the knowledge to reconnect to nature and promote a greener development. Grow the balance between local and global, planet and people, today and tomorrow. Growth starts with you. Welcome to Expo 2023, Doha, Qatar. Qatar has the perfect conditions for this growth to take roots. From Doha, we can grow a green desert and a better environment. Our expo site consists of 3 main areas designed to host, gather, and inspire. Together we can sow the days of tomorrow for everyone to enjoy, everywhere. We are expecting you on the 2nd of October 2023. One expo site, consisting of 3 character areas, is growing now to welcome you in 2023 to the future of horticulture. You are the seed and the movement that will gather the world in Qatar. Together in Doha, we will grow a green desert for a better environment.